Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome my listeners and viewers in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco, and it is Tuesday here in New York City, so let's go behind the headlines and get the real story. Today, we are going to talk about the new good cause eviction laws. But first, this is Talking New York Real Estate. And up front today, New York City's newly enacted good cause eviction laws represent a significant shift in tenant protections, aiming to curb unjust evictions and promote housing stability. These laws stipulate that landlords must provide a valid reason for not renewing a lease or for evicting a tenant, such as for non-payment of rent, illegal activities, or violating lease terms. Furthermore, rent increases are now regulated, requiring justification if they can exceed certain thresholds, ensuring that they are not used as a tactic to indirectly evict tenants. The legislation seeks to balance the rights of property owners and tenants. Also today, the new application Super has emerged as a superior alternative to the widely used property management tool Building Link. Designed to streamline and enhance property management, Super offers a more intuitive user interface, advanced features, and improved performance. We will discuss, and we will have all that and so much more as Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this very heated Tuesday morning in New York. And in the news this morning, The Real Deal broke the news last week that a top broker, Orrin Alexander, and his twin brother alone have been accused of rape and sexual assault by at least two women. The complaints detail events that allegedly took place more than a decade ago, but the lawsuit also, nearly 30 other people came forward alleging similar incidents after the story published, another 30, according to an attorney representing the two women who speak to a pattern of alleged gender-based violence. More on that as the news comes in. And the riverfront home of Hollywood power couple Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas is going on the market for $12 million. It has roughly 12 acres with 130 feet of frontage on the Hudson River in the affluent and quaint village of Irvington here in New York. Zeta-Jones bought the 12,000 square foot home in 2019 for $4.5 million, according to public records. And according to a statement to the press, the couple planned to spend more time in Bermuda and Europe. How nice is that? Tenants living in New York City's roughly 1 million rent-stabilized apartments will see their rents rise for a third year in a row after the Rent Guidelines Board approved rent hikes in a heated vote last Monday. The RGB approved rent increases of up to 2.75% on one-year leases and 5.25% on two-year leases. The decision applies to leases that are signed on or after October 1st of this year. And the vote took place amid boos, cheers, and chants of shame from the audience at Hunter College that night. Police detained several protesters who were gathered outside the building, according to the New York Daily News. Work to extend the 2nd Avenue subway line or the Q line has stopped following Governor Kathy Hochul's delay of New York City's congestion pricing program. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority on Tuesday last week announced that work on the transit project, which would extend the Q line from its current endpoint at 96th Street to East Harlem at 125th Street, is now paused. The extension was one of the projects that would have been funded fully or in part from congestion pricing revenue. And also the governor on Thursday last week said she is considering banning face masks on the city subway system after a rise in anti-Semitic acts. Recently, a video circulated on social media showing protesters on a crowded subway car asking any Zionist aboard to raise their hands, followed by, "This is your chance to get out." Specific policy details are still unclear, but any mask ban would include exemptions for health, culture, or religious reasons, and the governor said she is currently in talks with lawmakers on that matter. And finally, Jennifer Lopez is saying goodbye to Madison Square Park. The star, singer, and actress has finally found a buyer for her posh penthouse at the Whitman, which fronts the popular Manhattan green space. The final sale price, as well as the identity of the new owner, aren't known yet, but the sprawling duplex was last asking $24.9 $99 million. Listing agents Chris Pomeroy and Richard Ornstein of Brown Harris Stevens declined to comment on the listing update. And with me today are Dylan Pachulik, CEO, XL Real Property Management, Lindsay Liu, co-founder, CEO of Super, and Sanad Amatovich from Brown Harris Stevens. Okay, everybody, we are going to talk today about good cause for evictions. Now, I don't know what could be good about eviction on any level, but we have the experts here who are going to clarify it for us. It's a bunch of new laws that came into effect, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months ago. So we're going to do our best to kind of break it down, understand what it means, and how it may have changed. So, Dylan, let me start with you. What constitutes a good cause for eviction under the current laws versus, I guess, what used to be?
Right. I guess the biggest change that was made regarding good cause eviction is we're now limiting the amount of increases that we can give to our rental tenants, even on the free market side. So as everyone knows, on the rent stabilized side, there was always annual increases. They had that RGB meeting every year where they yell and scream and fist fight. And why do they do that? We don't know. But now we've got limitations on the free market side that you can't raise rents more than, let's say, 10%. And there's a way of figuring out what the annual increase will be. But now free market rents, in a lot of cases, are capped at 10%. But there are, at least, luckily for us, a ton of exceptions.
10% per year?
10% per year.
Lease expiration?
Per year. So essentially, or expiration. So essentially, you can raise it 5% plus CPI for that year. This year, it's 3.82%. So the maximum we can raise a free market rent to is 8.32%. Before it was unlimited. On the free market side, you could raise it as much as you wanted.
So how do you get evicted? Is it for non-payment of rent? Is it for, violations of house rules or all of the above? Because people say all the time, well, eviction has always been in place in New York City. But where has these new laws changed that? Obviously, if you don't pay your rent, you got a problem.
Right.
So, what else?
Yeah. So, look, you can still evict for, bad behavior, illegal activity, not paying rent, things of that nature. I guess the only thing that really changed is the landlord can't raise your rent more than that 5% plus CPI. So, you can't, it was never considered a real eviction, but you can't price the tenant out of the apartment, essentially, is what they're trying to prevent you from doing, saying, hey, I don't like the tenant, if you want a renewal, fine, I'll renew you for a 20% increase. You can no longer do that.
That's their goal, though. But I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sanad, because I think, you do a bunch of rentals as well. During COVID, okay, when they couldn't really rent apartments because everybody was leaving the city, whatever the reasons were. So they were offering really special discounts to get people in, okay? And then all of a sudden, when things calmed down and people started coming back, landlords, in a lot of cases, were increasing rents more than 20%, 50%, trying to make up for lost time.
Catch up.
So where's the balance there? I don't necessarily understand. How do they get away with that?
Well, back then, we obviously didn't have these new laws, capping non-regulated apartments at that time. So it was free for all. The landlords were able to do that, naturally. So it was demand and, supply that was dictating the prices back then. But, when it comes to, evictions, during COVID and, right post, we actually had a moratorium, if you remember.
Yeah, definitely.
So people, landlords couldn't evict, tenants, back then. So
right.
Those were sort of a protections that were put in place, to protect tenants in that, post-COVID, era, because of these, increases in part, because, if you have received like a, 3 months free rent and you were paying, $2,500 on a $4,000, apartment before, suddenly you're obviously not able to afford that. So you can't.
Right. And so many people had to move on and move out because they couldn't afford the increase. But as Dylan said before, capped now with 10%.
Up to 10%. But can we go back to the 50% thing? Because it drives me crazy that people keep, and I understand why everyone's doing it. We're quoting rent increases as being 50%, but we're comparing that to an incredibly artificial market where everybody fled and landlords had to beg tenants to rent. So we keep throwing out the number 50% for sensational reasons, but we were really up maybe 5 to 10% from pre-COVID real price levels. So I understand the urge to quote it at 50%. 50% increase, but it's not like the landlord got all that 50%. No, we were just bringing it back to market from an incredibly artificially devalued market.
We talked about the cap, but what is the process that landlords have to go through in order to justify a significant rent increase? I mean, is there a particular process that they have to now document with these new laws, or that can they just say, all right, I have the leverage of up to 10%, so I'm going to go to 9 or I'm going to go to 10?
Yeah, and we can. It's 5% plus CPI. So if CPI next year is 1%, let's call it, then the max you can raise rent is only 6%. So it's going to be up to 10%. That's the absolute upper limit, but it could still easily be, a 6% increase still allow, and that's it. You don't have to justify it. It's an automatic increase if it's at market. Like, for example, if I want the tenant to stay, I'm not going to take you, all the way to 9% if the market only increased by 3%. But
look at the way that
this applies to non-regulated apartments. We still have the two categories in New York City,
right,
which are rent controlled and rent stabilized
right,
units, where the HCR is really dictating the increases.
Well, as
annually.
I said in the beginning, in the opening, with those $1 million rent, controlled apartments or stabilized apartments, they're getting 2.5% on 1-year renewals and 5.25% on 2-year renewals. So that in itself can be significant. Whereby in the past, they got little to no increases in their rents, right?
Yes,
and sometimes freezes.
And sometimes freezes.
There were years exactly where they would freeze the increases. There was no increase, and then the second, year after that, they would kind of catch up and do the 2% increase. But that's now increased as well.
What are some of the protections that tenants have now with these new laws? We talked about the increases, right? But as far as evictions are concerned, or living conditions, what are protections that maybe didn't exist in the old laws that maybe now exist in the new laws?
I don't think there's
people should be aware of out there, because most renters, just like anybody else, okay, you start working with a renter and they want an apartment, they want this, they want that, they're okay with the number, they get approved and they move in, but no one really peels that back and understands what they're protected with.
Right. Well, I think all the bigger protections all came in 2019, and that's when they did that sweeping overhaul and said, okay, you can only pay 1 month rent, 1 month security.
Right.
I think it's more of an unwritten rules that now exist and made it impossible to evict, which gave tenants more protection, but in an unofficial way. And that's if we go to housing court. The amount of time it now takes you to get through an eviction case, if we have to evict somebody, pre-pandemic, maybe you'd be looking at a year, maybe a year and a half if it's a complicated case. I have people that haven't paid rent for 3 years already. Yeah. And the amount of delays that you get in housing court, it's like an unofficial additional protection. We just went to court in November. I went to court and we were supposed to have a trial. The judge says, okay, we were supposed to do a trial today. I have a headache. You've got to come back. And we said, Judge, this guy owes us $170,000. Can we please go with the trial? No, I've got a headache. We can't do it today. I'm like, when can we go back? He's like, May 6th. I'm like, that's $17,000 a month. Another 6 months. The guy's going to owe us another $100,000. And
the courts are backed up completely, especially when it comes to evictions. And so, when you hear about new laws, where it applies to evictions and whatever else, you're like, okay, well, the backup or the backlog is not really going to diminish. It's going to be the same, if not grow by week, by month, by whatever.
Grow,
Correct.
I mean, there's nothing new in terms of, what constitutes, good cause compared to prior laws. It's just that this new laws has, I think, put a spotlight on it, more.
Right.
And the tenants are now reading about it. They're learning more about it, and they're obviously more aware of it. So I think it's, as you just pointed out, I think it's going to contribute to a more cases in front of the housing courts.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the backlog grows. Backlog, yes. It definitely grows. But there has to be a process. There has to be documentation needed. There has to be a lot of things. Just not paying rent. I mean, it's significant. I get it. But how and why are you presenting the case? Is it just based on that? Is it based on several other things? Does length of time in a building make a difference? If somebody's there 20 years and all of a sudden falls behind because maybe they lose their job or whatever, is there a little kind of sensitivity to that? Again, I don't do a lot of rentals, so I'm not really aware of what that process is, or I would like to use the word empathy. Is there any empathy involved here at all?
I certainly feel that there is. Obviously, if you have a tenant who's never presented an issue, who's paying the rent on
Right.
time,
Right.
for you to raise the rent on them 10%, and you
Right.
know that they won't be able to afford it, and then
Right.
suddenly you're going to lose that tenant. You're going to incur additional costs. There's going to be a downtime in between the tenants.
Yeah.
There's going to be, you might have to pay a broker's fee depending on the market conditions.
We're going to get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Exactly. So naturally, there is that, I think, natural move, in the tenant-landlord relationship where, you really want to keep the good paying tenants
Right.
there, even if you're getting a little less than, the market at that time. That
Well-
also can prevent, finding, a new tenant. There's a risk involved, how good that tenant, will turn out. Will you have to take them to court and, evict them later on? So there's certainly a...
Well, I think as Dylan said before, when the landlord wants to raise the rent by X amount, 50%, whatever the number is, I mean, and then the tenant can't pay it and decides they have to leave, or if they stay until they find something else, that's wrong, correct? And so when your rent gets, it happened to my niece after COVID. She went from a bargain that I, in real estate for 20 years, couldn't even believe, to more than double when her 2-year lease expired. $2,500, I think she got in there for, on the Upper East Side. And they came back with like $4,800 or $4,900 for the renewal. She's like, wait a minute, what is that about?
Right.
And I said, you got to go, period. Leave.
The tenant couldn't afford the increase, and obviously we're empathetic as landlords, but the landlord couldn't afford to rent you the apartment at that level. I mean, all those COVID deals, we couldn't pay the property taxes with the rent we were getting, and it's a shame. The rent it had to jump. Like, there was no alternative. The landlord has common charges and insurance and the million other things you have to pay. There is some, personal responsibility in those COVID deals when you had to leave. Like, the market was artificial. You could live in an apartment that you would normally not be able to afford to live in, and then the market came back. Like, what were you kind of expecting was going to happen? Because the rates we were charging, we couldn't pay the mortgage. You couldn't pay the like, we took as much as we could just to get something in the door to
Right, not to have vacancy.
But the landlord, just like you can't afford to pay it, the landlord couldn't afford to rent you the apartment at that level. He would lose the asset. And then from an empathy point of view, if we're helping the tenant, but then the landlord's going bankrupt and losing his assets, that's not really a fair system.
We had landlords that really saw an exodus of tenants.
Yeah.
So in a building of 300 units, you had 200 empty units during COVID. So
I understand, but I wonder how, as you pointed out, how landlords and building owners, whatever, got past these down period. How did they pay the rent and how did they pay the taxes? And we all know what real estate taxes are in New York City. It needed to go back to normal rents. I get it. But how did they do this?
I mean, a lot of landlords lost assets during the pandemic. I mean, especially those that had, tenants that weren't paying rent, and we had the eviction moratorium. I had a woman who was literally dying of cancer. It's like one of the saddest stories I've had to deal with. She was dying of cancer, and the tenant wouldn't pay rent for more than a year, and she died. And they foreclosed on the building as she was dying because she could not pay her mortgage.
Sad. And,
it's sad.
It's just like, I've sold townhouses and brownstones to customers, and sometimes they're not completely empty or vacant. There's always one tenant somewhere in the building who's rent controlled,
right,
and paying $500 a month, and you can't put them out, you can't evict them, you can't throw them on the street, they have no lease, whatever, they've been there for 100 years. What do you do with that, right? We got so much more to talk about. We're coming back after the break. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place. The More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So, talking about good cause eviction. And as I said at the top of the show, I don't know any eviction that could be a good thing, but I guess if you deserve it, you deserve it. And we are being very sensitive to landlords and tenants at the same time. So I want to ask about the relationship between landlords and tenants typically, right? Good relationships, bad relationships, not if they're not paying, but just in general. Because most tenants will say, oh, the landlord's the boogeyman. Oh, the landlord is this. Or the landlord is, whatever. How true is that?
I don't think I think there's bad. It's like every other industry in this world. Like there's bad cops, right? There's very good cops and there's bad cops. There's very good teachers and there's bad teachers. There's good landlords and there's bad landlords. To lump everyone together is unfair, just like we can't lump real estate brokers. Some people love them. Some people, every industry has
some people hate them.
Good actors, good actors and villains. But, it's supposed to be it's a symbiotic relationship. We're supposed to help each other. Landlords should respect the tenant, take care of what he's supposed to in terms of the lease. Tenant should pay the rent, try not to, disrupt the building activity. But there's bad landlords and there's good landlords. There's bad everything and good everything.
As long as there's transparency, I think, in that, landlord-tenant relationship and everybody, holds up their bargain, I think then, there's a good prospect of, good relationship. Problem becomes, obviously when one, side or the other doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. It's true, both for landlords and the tenants. Some landlords obviously, don't provide services that they're supposed to. Other tenants, don't pay their rent, or they abuse their...
Or they abuse the rules or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're a nuisance to other, residents in the building.
Yeah, like I said, being sensitive to both sides, the landlord side and the tenant side. And listen, tenants can be tenants, okay? And they're not going to necessarily cooperate. Aside from not paying rent, just by doing things in the building that they're not supposed to do.
Right.
Or they shouldn't do.
Being disruptive.
Being disruptive.
To other people.
Being loud. I mean, how many times, even on the sales side, right? You're showing an apartment and all of a sudden you arrive on the floor, the elevator opens and you hear blasting music coming out of an apartment. You're
and
like...
a cloud of pot smoke.
that's another thing, a cloud of... And a lot of that. And you're like, and I want to potentially think about buying this apartment? I don't think so.
The door's always open and there's a curry smell, throughout the building.
Curry smell. Yes, exactly. But it's true, and even more so lately, okay? And we're going to talk about great applications in residential buildings in a minute, but the bottom line is, we have to understand both sides, okay? When you're in a sales transaction, the seller side and the buy side couldn't be any more different, right? But you got to come together to make a transaction successful. Talking about tenants who misbehave, what are some of the things that they can do? Again, not the rent side, paying the rent, but what are some of the things that tenants can do or do that get themselves in trouble where they want to be thrown out or the landlord wants to throw them out? Give us a couple of examples.
Some people problems are always going to happen in an apartment. Sometimes the air is going to break, the stove is going to break.
They're dancing in the hallway naked? Yeah. I mean, what do they do?
They're calling the HPD on the landlord because we have some tenants like, the hot water went out. And instead of letting the landlord fix it, giving him time, sometimes it takes a day to get apart. They call the HPD. HPD comes out, finds the owner, finds other challenges in the building. We have people who, we have a tenant who in Soho who lives on the second floor. He's an eviction tenant. They've been trying to get him out for 2 years, and he's paying off the fire escape onto Grand Street. Throwing 200-person parties in the apartment, throwing his trash out outside of trash hours, and he's not just affecting the landlord; he's affecting the entire building in the neighborhood. Like, do you want to have?
That's definitely cause.
Like he's peeing off the fire escape. It's unbelievable.
You can't make this stuff up, but and again, only in New York City. I mean, you can't. It is what it is. I just think though that people do misbehave, and probably in not in every building, but in certain situations. But I mean, again, I've walked through buildings and not only just on the rental side and heard lots of noise and banging and whatever else is going on, and you think, all right, so. The tenant underneath, the tenant next door, or sometimes even above you, depending on the construction of the building, you're getting a lot of noise. So what do you do about that? I mean, you can't just get thrown out of a building for simple things. You got to have a consistent show of bad behavior, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for a landlord, there's a certain procedure, obviously, that is involved in before you can evict somebody. So you have to, notify them, give them, a cause what's the word I'm looking for? You give them a notice, of cause,
Right.
to fix the
Right.
issue. So if they persist, it's usually 10 or 15-day period, to for them to fix whatever is causing a nuisance. If that persists, then obviously you can file
An eviction action.
an eviction, notice exactly, or send it to them. But there's various things that are cause for eviction. Not just loud noise. People do illegal activity in the apartment.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
They can illegally sublet the apartments. We have
That's a
people
biggie.
who do short-term rentals which are not permitted. So
drug rings, sex rings, I mean, you name it,
Everything.
it goes on.
I've seen
And
it.
again,
I've seen it all.
not for anything, but this is New York City. So, if you ain't going to find it here, you ain't going to find it anywhere. Okay. So I get that. But let me ask you, Dylan, the difference, because your company manages buildings. Is there a difference between rental buildings and condo buildings where it's individual owners, or is it the same?
That is, there's, are we talking about good cause here?
Yeah.
Because there is the only thing that's relatively palatable about good cause is there's a lot of exceptions to it. Condo and co-op owners, they don't have to abide by good cause. If you've got a high value unit, more than 245% of fair market value for the neighborhood, you don't have to participate in good cause. So at least there are some exceptions to it.
Explain that.
254% of, I think, fair market value of a unit. So if you've got a studio that rents for more than $5,500, and then it goes all the way up to, I think, $9,000 for a 3-bedroom. So if I've got a $20,000 apartment, good cause doesn't apply. There's a lot of ambiguity. Like it says that, the landlord, doesn't have to abide by good cause if the tenant's a nuisance, which I'm a landlord when tenant's not a nuisance, or if they've, committing objectionable conduct. But, that's a very subjective concept as well. I mean,
No. You're absolutely correct. But I have, in fact, I'm going to see her later this
it also
afternoon.
doesn't apply to short-term leases. Anything less than a year.
Yeah, seasonal.
Generally
No,
wouldn't apply.
right.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, 1 and or 2 year leases is what we're focusing on. But I'm going to visit a client later on after the show who I rented an apartment to in a condo in January. So what is it? almost 6? It is 6 months, almost 7 months. She's had nothing but issue from the day she moved in. The heating system, the old P-Tech system, the heating system blew. I can go on and on and on. The refrigerator blew. Now she texts me 2 weeks ago, the coil in the P-Tech system that was just replaced 3 months ago after she moved in, not only blew, but flooded the entire apartment.
Is she renting or she's an owner?
She's renting from
the
an owner.
Okay.
Flooded not only the inside of the apartment, damaged all her carpeting, and she's got very expensive stuff. And it also, these units go into the wall, so water was pouring out onto the street. The moral of the story here is she has a landlord or an owner of that apartment that pays no attention. She emails her, she texts her, she doesn't respond. It's like, wait a minute, your floors are under 3 inches of water. Do you care?
Yeah.
I don't have a refrigerator for 2 weeks. Do you care? So what is my response to my client? Go out and buy what you need. Go out and fix what you need. Deduct it off the rent. She clearly doesn't give a crap. Okay? Deduct it off the rent. I don't care if it's thousands of dollars. She's overpaying for that apartment anyway. Why is that allowed?
Or just stop paying the rent.
She asked me that, and I said, well, you don't want to get evicted, okay, because that's cause for getting thrown out of your apartment. But she said, well, what about all this is abusive. I said, no kidding.
Well, she wouldn't get evicted in that case for not paying the rent. If you've got legitimate repairs that aren't being handled, that's a tenant defense.
Not even responds to her.
Where is this? She needs Excel property management, it sounds like.
It's Worldwide Plaza, okay, in Hell's Kitchen. It's not too far from here. But bottom line is, I don't get that. I mean, that's complete neglect, abuse. I mean,
Yes,
the woman has
according to this new law, those are some of the avenues and protections that are put in place for tenants.
Yeah.
So in a case of a negligent landlord, tenant does have the right to withhold rent, for example, until the issue is fixed after obviously giving ample notice to the tenant. Same thing, as you just pointed out, they can actually themselves, after they are ignored by the landlord, let's say, they can hire a contractor to fix the issue and then deduct the cost.
Which is what I suggested she do, and what she has done. And the first time she deducted something off the rent, of course, the owner
that's going to get the notice.
emailed her and said, why did you short pay the rent or whatever? And she said, I explained it in detail in an email to you. Okay,
yeah,
you did respond to multiple calls. I had to fix it myself. Okay,
right, yeah, and you're going to pay.
Refrigerator goes. I mean, you're entitled to these things.
Yeah. Well, that's why, I mean, it's a lot of responsibility to be a landlord. You have to pay attention to the tenant, because if that case went to court, the judge would throw the landlord and they sued me for the tenant not paying. The judge is going to throw you out and say, go fix your stuff and then come back and let's talk.
No, it's a two-way street.
And that's the point I wanted to make. It's a two-way street, and it's not only the tenant, it's sometimes in defense of landlords, because I get both sides, but it's sometimes the landlord who, in this particular case, is out of her mind.
Yeah. Or just derelict, or doesn't know. I mean, we don't even know the story. Some of our landlords just don't even know,
Well,
but you should, if you know that little, you should.
I was a landlord for a brief period of time. I owned a condo in Westchester before I moved to the city, and I decided, well, you know what? I don't want to sell it right now, so I rented it. And anytime the phone rang, or before text and all that stuff, I answered the phone and I took care of whatever the issue was, because I felt responsible. And I think one of the problems we have here is landlords are not responsible, or they really don't care to be responsible. You're living in it. Some do. But in this particular, I keep going back to this one person. She's a nightmare.
Right.
An absolute nightmare.
In those cases,
I had to write a letter for my client to send to her that was pretty strong. No response. Nothing. Nothing.
Well, in those cases, you stop paying rent. You just stop paying, and then
good examples. We have good landlords, who are responsible, who will, in a timely manner respond, to any complaints or things happen. Things break in the apartment. There's no way around it. So if you, as I said, it's a two-way street. If you want a tenant, to be, paying on time, to stay for a while, you have to do your end of the bargain as a landlord.
Well said. You want to keep your tenant? Nobody wants to constantly turn over an apartment. I mean, by the time you qualify somebody, and
it's expensive. Vacancy loss,
exactly. And sometimes you don't rent them so quickly. So you want to make sure that you keep the tenant.
There's a downtime.
Retention, right?
The apartment, you have to fix it up after each tenant. That there's a cost involved.
Right. Well, this one in a condo, because building rental buildings have different rules than condo buildings. Owners say, as is. I'm not painting. I'm not doing floors. I'm not doing whatever. You want to rent my apartment? Move in. And some will say, I'll do all these things up front. She was supposed to paint. She was supposed to fix the floors. She did not. So I said to my client, do it and take it off the first month's rent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's when she got to my client and said, you're living here 1 month. Why did you short pay the rent? Well, you didn't paint, and you were supposed to. You said you were going to. You didn't fix the floors.
That's a red flag. When you encounter an owner like that,
that's more than a red flag. That's more than a red flag. So I'm going to visit this afternoon because I want to see the floors that are. She said your floors are popping up under the radiator because there were 3 inches of water. Do you plan on fixing those?
Also, if you didn't bring in dehumidifiers and dry the water up, there could be mold at this point.
The building did that, and now she's got mold.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, and that's another cause not to pay rent. It's uninhabitable.
Right. Right, and that's what I was getting at. So now she's got mold.
Yeah.
So now that's a health or medical problem, and she happens to be severely allergic to mold.
Oh, God.
I mean, really?
Well, this isn't beyond a normal case. I mean, in this kind of case, like, she could, literally bend the landlord over a barrel, and that's it. I mean...
the problem is you don't want to keep moving.
Yeah.
I mean, moving is expensive. Moving is a nightmare. Moving is, invasive. I mean, you could use any term you want for moving. I dread the thought of moving someday. I'm living in my apartment 20 years. I don't even want to know what's in that cabinet or that cabinet or whatever. It's rough, right? So she just moved.
Yeah.
So again, looking at the tenant side, looking at the landlord side, there has to be a compromise, and there has to be an easy compromise. You have to understand this is your property. You're renting it out, whether you're a landlord of the whole building or a landlord of just that one unit. You need to treat people fairly. And I think in this business, this is where things go awry because they don't do that. on any level.
Well, that's a win-win for everybody. Look, I'm a tenant. I love my landlord. If I pay my rent on time every month. When there's a problem, she handles it, or at least acts like she cares, even if she doesn't. And then you can raise the rent. I'm happy to pay it. There's no animosity. I do what I'm supposed to. Like that's It's a social contract. It's not just a landlord-tenant thing anymore. It's this whole social contract that people need to be reminded of in all facets of life. Like, you do what you're supposed to do, I'll do what I'm supposed to do, and everybody wins. Where you don't win is in this landlord situation.
Well, when you walk into a building and you rent an apartment or you buy an apartment, there are house rules or whatever the building calls them. Pay attention to the house rules. I mean, I know of one incident where they threatened to throw him out because he kept throwing parties in the courtyard, and they were told from day one, this is not a place for parties. You want to have parties or guests upstairs on the rooftop, because there are two buildings facing this courtyard. It's quiet. It's zen.
Yeah.
Didn't care. Or the other one, and I wanted to ask you about that too, before we go to break, is this Airbnb stuff, okay? Not allowed.
Illegal, yeah.
It's illegal, although somebody just recently told me that if it's short-term, it's allowed, but not long-term. What are the rules on that? Do you know? I don't know.
It's got to be 30 days or more. And now you have to, if you're going to do it short-term, you got to register for the city with the city.
In New York City.
Yeah. You're going to register with New York City, and you can't rent out for less than 30 days. It's got to be more than 30 days. Otherwise, you're considered a hotel.
Right. But buildings won't allow you to do that anyway, whether it's Airbnb or, because I know in some buildings, tenants will come in short-term and say, can I only do 6 months or less? Especially in my condos, and I'm like, no, the building requires 6 months or more.
Right. Yeah, but
so you can't do that. Right?
Yeah, but so they go and they take a nondescript walk-up rent to a building with no doorman, and they do it there. But then the city has a whole special task force now that only wants to catch short-term rentals, and the fines are astronomical.
And you're required to pay hotel tax, and there's all these other stuff. If you are registered as a short-term provider, basically, so you're running like a hotel.
But then you're not meeting code as well, because okay, fine, you're renting less than 30 days. We consider you a hotel, pay the hotel tax, and you don't have the equipment that a hotel has regarding egress and signage and all that, and they just fine you the hell out of you on these things.
Well, I work in this one condo almost all the time, and I sold this studio to someone, and she was told by me, you can't do this. Okay, from day one. Okay. Airbnb from day one. 1 week, 3 days, 5 days. So the super one day came to me when I was in the building and said, by the way, do you know what's going on in 1E? And I'm like, no, what's going on? And he told me, and I thought, okay. She was written up condo, okay? Managing agent got involved multiple times. They forced her to sell. Yeah. You're breaking the rules. You're breaking the neighbors on the floor were horrified that people walking down the hallway with pillows and blankets and bed sheets and the owner would actually
with suitcases through the lobby. Yeah.
The owner would actually stand in the lobby whenever somebody new would come in, or one of her ambassadors, whatever, and hand them all the bed sheets and whatever. I said, you can't leave them in the apartment? Really? You got to hand them to her?
See, we have bad tenants also, not just bad,
No, there was a problem, obviously. I had a landlord, who has a building in Hell's Kitchen. It's really close to Times Square, so it's a rental building. These are small studio apartments, and we had multiple cases over several years where people would rent long term. You can't tell. Everything checks out. We do the paperwork, background check, and then a month later it's turned into an Airbnb because they can make so much money.
Yeah,
they figured.
Listen, Airbnb is a wonderful thing, but not in New York City. You want to buy a townhouse? Do it. You want to go to Westchester, New Jersey, or Long Island, or whatever? Go have it. Go have a party.
That's exactly the illegal activity we were talking about, which is cause for eviction.
Yeah. Right. All right, we're going to take a break. We're coming right back. We're going to talk about a new application in residential buildings called Super with the owner of the company when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Okay, everybody, we are back. So before the break, I mentioned that there's a new application out there called Super. It replaces something that's been out there for a while called Building Link. So I wanted to ask Lindsay, Super has emerged as an alternative to the widely used property management system, Building Link. Tell us why. Was there a need for a new application? Was there a need to enhance what was already out there? What was your vision, and how is it being received out there?
So Super was started from my own personal experiences. I invest in real estate. I am a landlord as well, hopefully one of the good ones out there. I have a point of view on that as well. And it really came from actually specifically, I've been on the board of 3 HOAs at this point, which I would not recommend to anyone sane.
Complicated.
You go in, you're like, I can get so much stuff done and I'm really capable. I'm passionate about this. And you're like, I can't get anything done in this environment. And it was...
Welcome to politics, even on the residential side.
Yep.
So it became very, very clear that we just needed better technology in the space. That's the background that I come from. Like the day job was always on the technology side of things. And a lot of it comes down to communication. I think that actually when we talk about what happens with tenants and their asset managers, right? A lot of that friction comes from poor communication. It's you didn't respond to me fast enough. It's I don't know what's going on. It's you didn't log the issue that I had, so I didn't have enough time to deal with it. Like a lot of that actually comes down to the fact that people want to have easier ways to communicate with each other. And one of the things that we've really learned is that at the end of the day, you can have a great portal. It's still a portal. Nobody wants to log into something just to tell you that their toilet is clogged, right? They're going to call you. They're going to text you. They got your email. They're emailing you about it. That's the simplest thing for somebody to do. So what we decided was to create a streamlined communication platform. That's really the heart and soul of what we have is an AI-powered hub that takes emails, phone calls, text messages. It can take work orders from other systems as well. So we can actually layer on top of a property management system that people are using for that. And we pull it all into one place, and then we can automate a bunch of things on top of that so that people get faster responses. You have a paper trail for every communication. I think, just to the points we were talking about as far as eviction, I think any landlord wants to have really clear paper trails. I did what I was supposed to do at those times. I did it within the timelines that I was supposed to do it in. And that's really difficult when you're straddling phone calls, text messages, emails, something in a portal to pull that story together for court. I'm sure you've been in that situation before, just printing things out, right? Bringing that together to bring to court. And so we streamline and centralize all of that.
So does it actually replace the current, building link? They pull it out and put Super in, or does it kind of work, on top of it? How does it actually replace what already exists?
We have folks doing it both ways. So I would say all of the above is kind of the answer, right? In some cases, if the need for the building really is just a more streamlined communication tool, we can be a great solution for that. In some cases, actually, we're used more by the management teams as a way for them to centralize their workflow. So if you're a property manager, you oversee 100 buildings, right?
We spoke.
Yep. And that's a lot of inflow of communication across those 100 buildings. And I think, one of the things that Building Link has done very well over time is they're very specialized for the staff of that building.
Correct.
Right?
Right. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Go ahead.
What it's not really designed for.
And not AI-centric. Right.
I mean, we're building in the age of 2024 right now. It's impossible not to be an AI company, I think.
No,
right
no,
now.
I'm saying Building Link.
Oh,
is not.
right. Yes.
Right. No,
yeah.
yours. Yes, I know that.
And so one of the things that we've really seen with folks using Building Link is that it's not really for portfolio management, right? So you can't get rolled up views of what's going on across your portfolio. You have to go individual building.
Interesting. Individual building, yeah.
And so for portfolio managers, this becomes a more efficient way to be able to see what's going on and to be able to do things like mass communications. So for instance.
So even if you're a landlord who owns more than one building.
Exactly. So you can get the leverage of the efficiency with one platform that can manage the entire portfolio at once.
Got it. What is your opinion?
I think it's smart. I mean, the biggest issue that we all have is communication and the lack of communication. So any way that you can maximize the efficiency of it and do it in a way and make it easy as well. I agree with in the portal. Nobody wants. I don't like to have apps on my phone. I forget all the passwords. I used the app one time and 6 months later went by and reset my any way you can streamline this benefits the owner and the tenant, because a lot of stuff just gets lost in the sauce.
I think most tenants, though, as far as Building Link is concerned, they know that I need to send an email like I'm going to a building, I have an open house tonight, and they have Building Link. So maybe you can sell to Halstead Management. They put me in the system to have access to the key anytime I go to show, right? PTE, permission to enter. So I think most tenants don't really understand the capabilities that are out there, even with Building Link or now with Super, that's greatly enhancing it. Because all they do is maybe send an email, oh, I have a plant for sale, or I have a storage locker for rent, and it goes to the whole building, which we, of course, can't get access to, because if you don't live there, you can't get access. So I think they're limited in what they know these applications can do. So tell us quickly how Super really can enhance a resident's, existence in a building. What can they do more than what they have today?
I think the biggest component that we think about for enhancing, and I actually like to think of our platform as the intersection of like management team efficiency and 5-star resident experience, right? That's like the mecca right there. If you can be an efficient, well-oiled
5-star
machine,
anything works for me.
and it's a very good experience on the other side,
Sure.
right? So you're not just cutting corners, you're actually making it better. And I think that's the really big thing, is that I think, the number one complaints that tenants have are speed of response from their management. I mean, you heard it from your story. I never heard back, right?
Right.
And that's one of those things that really affects your experience there, is if it's just you want to live in a good, safe home, and you want that home to be enjoyable to live in. And if your issues are not being dealt with in a timely manner, that is going to supersede whatever amenities they might have in that building at the end of the day.
Sanad, so, feedback from your clients or whatever about the existing application, the old application, Building Link. Any comments on that? I mean, I used to think it was wonderful. I mean, again, I use it very limitedly because I go and I get access to a key without having to, move mountains, whatever. Right. But I mean, that's all basically I think it does. Or communicating within companies, within the building with other residents.
Sure. I mean, like any platform, it has its uses, and it was great, for those individual buildings and owners to deal with. But what I think, as you pointed out, we're living in an AI environment now. Everything is instant gratification. Everybody wants to receive a response right away. So I think for anything nowadays to be successful, it has to evolve. So, even, whether it's a building, there's, plenty of other management, applications, out there and platforms. They have to, be following the trends. So they have to be sort of an open source, they have to integrate, with other applications, cross platforms in order to, really work and to keep up with, the ever-evolving demands of tenants and property owners.
I mean, clearly AI, artificial intelligence, is the elephant in the room, right? I mean, we're all kind of like, whoa, we have our like, we have our dislike, we have our skepticism. In your opinion, are your landlords or the buildings that you manage, are they kind of feeling threatened by artificial intelligence? Are they scared of it? Do they even understand it?
Do any of us really understand it? All we know is we have this looming concept called AI that is going to take, basically robots are going to run the world at this point, and no industry is safe from it.
It's very scary to think about when you really, peel back the onion on that, right?
We forget that we've been using many aspects of AI for years now. We just didn't know it, or we didn't call it.
We didn't call it that. Yeah,
we didn't call it that. Right. Now the focus is on that. So I have to think, though, because most people are a little threatened by it until they really get to understand it, I have to assume that building management is also the same way. I mean, it's like, what is this going to do for me? Or what can it do maybe that will harm me, or what, whatever their thought is. I don't know.
Personally, I'm scared. Like, I'm not a big technology guy. Like, I don't like apps. I don't like any of this stuff.
I like simple stuff.
Simple stuff I'm okay with. But, but I understand that, as life goes by and there's more technological advancements, we've got to participate. But it's scary. Like, what is it going to do? And how is it going to hurt us? Because,
change is scary. We all, I
change
myself,
it
exactly, old fashioned, I use, some tools for 25 years, in the business, like I used to, and but in order to grow, yourself, as a broker, as a team, you have to incorporate all these new features, and you shouldn't be afraid of that innovation and change in any industry.
think
Linda,
we
do
see-
you get
yeah.
any pushback when you're selling your application? I'm curious to see how that works myself. Actually, you opened something for me that said, "Oh, okay, I'll look at that." I mean, I have no use for it, but I'm interested in it, and I think anything really could fix Building Link. It's got to be great.
I think that fear is a incredible motivator and also an incredible inertia killer, right?
Yeah, well,
right. It's just like but I believe that we are in this moment where the cost of doing nothing is greater than trying something, because we are talking about the fact that everything has gotten more expensive, right? You cannot continue to run
Really?
a building and have it be profitable if you are constrained on your rent increases, if your insurance costs are going up, if the amount of compliance that you have to do to stay, in good standing with the city is going up.
Administrative costs.
Everything is going up. Your labor costs are gone up, right?
Everything.
And so you need to find ways to create more efficiency. That is the only way that landlords will continue to survive. And so I think the opportunity here is to say AI is not necessarily about taking jobs. I actually really believe that it is, AI well implemented is not taking away somebody's job. What it is doing, though, is it is taking away the repetitive work that's a brain drain for them, they don't like to do, that leads to turnover on teams, and that is a waste of their time, so that they can now go and do the really human things. They can go problem solve. They can go spend more time with the customer. They can go grow their business and focus on selling a new business, right? So instead of doing things like taking that text message that I just got from my tenant, putting it into the portal for them 50 times a day, think about that hour that you now have free back in your life. So that's really how I think about it, is if we can kind of take a step back from the fear a bit and say,
fear. Oh, love that word.
yep, there's a huge opportunity on the other side here. And what is the risk to me to doing nothing? It's actually that my business is not going to grow at the pace that I need it to in order to sustain in this new environment.
Someone else will automate and move forward. Yeah.
You manage buildings. What is the greatest time consumer of your day or your people's day?
I mean, the biggest thing is fielding complaints, and mainly, herding cats, like going, the contractors, because Excel's different. We have, most property managers have 10 buildings and all the activities in 10 buildings. Just on the individual unit side, we operate out of about 350 different buildings. So just trying to chase contractors and get them to go here. But, communication's
That's
a big
big.
part of that. I mean, it's, communication and getting my team also, as well as the tenant, to communicate effectively,
I should know the answer to this, but is it remote? I mean, can you use your Super on a phone or on an iPad or whatever? It's,
Yep,
I
so
don't
we
know if
have a
Building Link is, but
we have a responsive web app, so it works on any screen size. But the best part is we work with text message, phone calls,
Right.
email, right? So at the end of the day, push comes to shove, you can add a vendor to a text message thread via Super, and all they have to do is text you the photo of the work that they're doing, right? We're trying to make that so there's not even an app you need to download to be
Right.
able to leverage it.
we have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask a little bit about the current marketplace, where we are on the rental side. I mean, we talked about how rents have grown significantly, okay? I mean, popping up out of nowhere, these numbers. Your point, Dylan, earlier was a good point, and you just said, Lindsay, everything has got more expensive. Water, power, salaries in a building, everything.
Insurance is it's the
30%,
biggest culprit.
right?
50%, or hey, we're not even giving you a policy.
Wow.
We have apartments that are relative, and they're like, we don't want the risk. Like, we're never going to write you a policy no matter how much you pay.
So, with all of that said, rents have to go up. Okay?
They have to.
And we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years, that the rental numbers, I think last year the average rental for a one bedroom was $5,200, then down to $47, $48, then up to $55. I mean, but in that range for a one bedroom. Okay. I saw one the other day. I almost nearly fell off my chair because I know the building well. I know the line well. I know the apartment well. $5,200 a year for a one bedroom. I'm like,
You can't
how
even find
is
them.
that possible?
The vacancy rates are very, very low.
Correct. So, I'm thinking, how do we curb all this? We can't continue to raise rents. We can't continue to have all the expenses of the building go high day after day, year after year.
There's got to be something's going to happen. No, you're right. Also, who can afford to pay this? Like, you've priced every single person out of the market.
Well, as he just said, and you can't even find these apartments.
Yeah.
So people are out there looking and willing to pay it, but eventually they're not going to be able to pay it.
They won't be able to.
I mean, first-time renters, how could you pay $5,500 for a one-bedroom apartment?
That's
I mean,
what, $70,000 a year after tax, just for rent.
And you can't even
make
have a
$100,000
roommate in
to
a
pay
one-bed,
that.
right?
That's what we're seeing. We're seeing these, new hires, whose starting salaries are $180,000, and they still have to have a parent co-sign because they don't qualify.
$180,000. Isn't that something?
Well, he's
They
talking about the
don't
investment
qualify.
bankers, the hedge funders.
Well, in this town, the 40 or 45 times the rent is a killer.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. So if you're renting a $5,000, as you just said, a dollar apartment, you have to make $200,000. 40 times the rent is a formula.
And how
if
many
you're under
first-time renters coming out of school, or maybe even out of school for a year? Where do they make? Not everybody comes out making $200,000 a year.
What's that, 5% of the market maybe? If you went to iBanking or you graduated law school and you went to top big law or something like that, like who can afford these prices?
But then you got student loans on top of that, and everything else. I mean,
But
I just seem like we're falling into a trap of, I think, no return. I see where we're going to get. We are, and no, not trying to be doom and gloom here, but I mean, how do you get out of this?
Proof and point. We're seeing laws like these on the books that will limit, rental increases. So these are, this is a kind of push, from the rental advocacy groups and, others, lawmakers, to hopefully try to curb, those rents from, skyrocketing.
But it's not working. All you're doing is bankrupting landlords and you're making things actually more expensive. The whole broker fee law. Okay, fine. The landlord now has to pay 8.3% as the broker fee. Where does the landlord have the 8.3%? So where's he going to get it? The rent. Like you're just forcing the landlord to raise rent.
That's the other thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but just quickly, with these new rental commission proposed changes, I don't know where it's going to end up. You're asking the landlord to pay the commission to the person who's listing the apartment, and then the tenant broker gets nothing.
Yeah.
Because no tenant wants to pay. They just don't want to. And now if the law changes, they're like, I don't have to pay a commission. I'm already hearing it. They want me to work with them. And I said, well, there's a commission about, oh, no, we're not paying commission. We heard we don't have to pay commission.
Yeah.
Okay. Good luck.
We found it online. That's the most common excuse.
Yeah.
Street easier. I just found it on the street easier. But again, now you're taking another class of people, the real estate brokers, and now we're limiting y'all's income over it, right?
All I say is, oy vey.
Oy vey.
Okay?
Oy
That
vey.
is New York City. We're coming right back with my closing thoughts for the week. Lindsay, Sanad, Dylan, always, thank you for being
Pleasure.
here.
Thank
We're
you.
coming right back. All right, everybody, we're back with my closing thoughts for the week. Effective property management companies in New York City excel by offering comprehensive services tailored to the city's complex real estate landscape. They combine deep local knowledge with advanced technology to streamline operations, enhance tenant satisfaction, and maintain property values. These companies handle everything from routine maintenance and emergency repairs to financial management, including rent collection and budgeting. They also ensure compliance with New York City's stringent building codes and regulations, mitigating legal risks for property owners. By leveraging sophisticated communication tools, they facilitate interactions between landlords, tenants, and service providers. Additionally, top-tier property management companies in New York City often provide value with added services such as tenant screening, lease management, and strategic marketing to minimize vacancies and optimize rental income. Their ability to offer personalized, proactive, and professional management solutions makes them indispensable in the highly competitive and demanding New York City real estate market. XL Real Property Management Company is one of those companies, so look them up. It's worth it. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. Stephen Jobs once said, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. And a programming note, we are off for the next 2 weeks. Yay, a little bit of a summer break, but we'll return on July 16th with a very exciting new show. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.